So here's the thing about writing a book while you're running a business. Sometimes you need someone to hold you accountable, or you will 100% convince yourself that responding to emails is more productive work. Spoiler alert, it's not. Today, I am giving you an update on my book, Control Your Career working title. We don't actually have a title, but it's about my control your career process. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit about what I've learned about how writing the book and coaching is very different and how we had to change our thought process between the two. And then I'm also going to talk about just the writing process in general, which might not be of interest to all of you, but for some of you who are writing a book or considering writing a book, I think that you might find some interest in it. Either way, we are getting really honest about this process and giving you some updates. So let's get into it. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothaker, your strategic career consultant, and I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is all about helping ambitious professionals take control of their career with clarity and confidence. Today, as I said in the intro, we are taking a little bit of a detour. You know, I'm loving these bonus episodes, and this is no exception. I wanted to take a detour to talk about the book and give some updates and also explain why there haven't been updates, which you will definitely understand. So this book is going to be in two parts. Part one, or I'm sorry, this episode is going to be in two parts. Part one is going to be talking about some of the writing that I've been doing and the actual content of the book. So if that's something that interests you, stay tuned for part one. And then part two is going to be more about the process, writing, becoming an author, and just some of the things that I have learned so far very early in this journey. But I'm so glad that you're here, and I want to dig deep into this with you because I think it's important to bring you along into this journey of writing a book. I think it's much more complex than people realize, and I think that sometimes people make it out to seem like it's an easy thing, and it's not for a lot of different reasons. All right, so part one of this episode, I want to talk about the content of the book and some of the things that I have learned. So, for those of you who aren't aware or who might be new to my podcast, I'm writing a book and it's based on my Control Your Career process. This process is also a program that I offer. So you can actually learn more about that on my website. And then I have some episodes that are actually about the process as well. So if you want to get a little sneak peek into that, you can find that on the podcast page or even on the YouTube page if you're here from YouTube. So this is a general system and way that I work with clients. Why do I have my own process? Well, the career development process is very antiquated. It's very dated. It's based on a lot of research and information that was relevant decades ago. And by decades ago, I mean like the 1950s, 60s, 70s. That's where we see a lot of career development information come into play. And as you can imagine, doesn't really work for most people. I don't think that it works in our modern society. And I think that people are much more complex and unique than a lot of these models suggest. Now, obviously, these are models, these are guides. It's not going to be 100%. But in my work, I used to teach on this. I used to train grad students in career development. And so this is something that I was in for a long time. And I always found myself making caveats for it. You know, oh, this works, but not in these situations. This works, but not in these situations. Anyway, I got tired of that. So when I went out on my own and started my own business, I wanted to create a process that I felt worked for everybody, regardless of your worldview, your experience, your background, your level in your career. And so that's how the Control Your Career process came to be. And then I turned that process into a program. And now that program is becoming a book. So I am very excited about it. And the more that I get into it, the more excited I become. And part of that is because the process itself really works for coaching. And I'm a coach, that's what I do. And so when I wanted to turn this into a book, I knew that I had to dig deeper and I had to provide a different level of information so that you as the reader could go through the book and be able to use it as a resource. And the idea is that you are reading through this book and you are uncovering who you are. You are controlling your career through the different stages that I am walking you through. So it's basically like having a career coach in a book. And I think that's another thing that makes this a little bit different than other career books. I think a lot of career books say, do these 5 things, figure out this, do this. There is some of that, but it's really you uncovering you. And I'm your guide. I'm helping you through that process. Okay. And just for the record, especially if you're watching this, I have an outline for this episode because I want to make sure that I'm covering everything. And also, I have a tendency to go completely off book if I don't have an outline. And so if you see me kind of looking down, that's why, because I want to make sure that I'm staying on track, but also giving you enough information so that you understand what is going on. So a couple of things about the structure of the book that I wanted to share that I haven't shared up to this point. So this book is going to be written basically in 2 parts. The first part is going to be going through the 5-stage process, and that is where you are really uncovering who you are in order to control your career. We're digging deep there, right? Part 2 is going to outline different career challenges and opportunities that are very common. So I'm taking my, oh gosh, are we at 15 years yet? I think I'm almost at 15 years of experience. That's wild. I'm taking all this experience that I have and I'm outlining some of the most common career challenges and career opportunities that I see. And then I'm using the process to help you work through that. So the idea here is that you are going to get a resource that you can take with you throughout your career. And again, that's what I'm so excited about for this book is I really see it being that book that you have on your shelf in your office, or it's the book that you continuously go back to if something's going on in your career. I think it's important to note, and I said this before, but I want to reiterate it because so many career books are about steps and they're about you have to do these things and you have to do it in this order and this works for me, so it's going to work for you. And that's not real. That's not real for the majority of people. This book, this process, it meets you where you're at, wherever you're at. And I think that that's one of the most exciting parts that's going to set it apart from other career books that you may have read, even leadership books. I think too, it's going to be different than what you've seen before. So what have I done up to this point? So what I recently finished writing is stage 1 of the process, which is, I think, one of the most complex parts of the process that requires the most of you as the reader. And I talk about this a lot on my podcast, on social media, and interviews that I do. But stage 1 of my process is called realistic reality. And it's figuring out what is real in your situation. And if you've ever been a client of mine, you know that that is language that I use all the time. What is real? What is actually happening? What is your reality versus what do you think happened? What's the story that you told yourself? Are you considering all the factors that are playing into the situation? So that's a little overview of that. I don't want to go too in depth with content because obviously I want you to read the book. But basically, what I'm helping you outline is your realistic reality in different areas of your life and career and how that impacts you, how it's impacted you up to this point, and how you believe it might impact you moving forward. What happened during this section was really interesting in terms of writing. So when I started writing this process, now remember, I'm a coach first, okay? Coach first, author second, writer second. And I started writing these sections as if I were coaching you through something. And it took me a couple of sections to get through when I finally realized, wait a minute, this is not right. This is not the way that this has to be written. Realistic reality is about you uncovering for yourself what your reality is with guidance from me. I'm not here to solve a problem for you. So I'll give you an example. There is a section around finances. Finances is a big topic, and there's a couple subsections there for it because it is so important to your career process and your career journey. When I was writing the process, when I was writing the section out, I realized that I was guiding you through and then also solving. So we talk about having a budget. We talk about understanding your numbers, your salary numbers. What do you need? What's your base? What's your ideal? We talk about, debt. We talk about all these different things because you have to be aware of them, right? Like you have to understand where your financial situation is. But it's not up to me to create a solution for you in this section. This section is about awareness. So what is your current reality, right? Do you have a lot of consumer debt? And how does that impact the choices that you make? You know, does having a mortgage impact the fact that you now need to work within the area that you live because you don't want to move? So there's a lot of financial considerations that come in to your career path, right? And so what I started doing was solving for that. Oh, you don't have a budget? Well, make sure that you do these things. And I was trying to help you work through all your financial challenges that you might have. Well, one, I'm not a financial expert, but I know enough that I need you to be aware, right? And so that was where I got to with the writing is I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not solving. I'm not solving. Now, part 2 of the book, that's more solving. That's helping you walk through, again, situations, challenges, opportunities, and how do we coach for that? And what are we looking for? That's part 2 of the book. But part 1 is awareness. We're trying to get you to a level of, do I understand the impact that my reality has on my choices and decisions moving forward? And so once I figured that out, the writing process got significantly easier. And I think as a coach, this is something that I have to keep in mind is yes, I'm writing from the lens of a coach and you are 100% going to hear me in the writing of this, but it's about the awareness. It's not about the coaching in the moment, specifically for realistic reality. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I don't know if this is actually interesting, but I figured if you find it interesting, great. If not, then maybe this isn't the episode for you. But I think it's so interesting to get into the process and the mind of somebody that's trying to work through this, right? So, okay, another thing that I wrote about already that has been really fun to write about is high impact habits, which is stage 5. I actually wrote a good chunk of that in early 2025. Um, Habits is a hard section to write about because there's a lot of literature around it. And so I think my approach is going to be a little bit different. But what I started writing for habits were stories and vignettes because I feel like that's one of the easiest ways to convey how habits work and how different personalities and people are going to approach habits. And that's going to be a really core piece of this book, is not assuming that everybody is going to approach things the same way. And I think that's really important, especially for our more neurodiverse people who might be reading this. So I wanted to make sure that I was approaching from both angles. So, one of the things that I write about in this book is our health journey, and it's going to get updated before we actually publish it to where we are now. But I just recorded an episode that went live maybe a month ago. So it's a couple episodes back from this one, but it's about our health journey. And I talk heavily about the habits that we developed and a lot of the challenges that we had and the wins that we had and what we were looking to do. So if that is something that interests you, if you want to have like a little sneak peek into the habit section, I highly recommend going and looking at that episode. I think that was a really good breakdown of some of what I will be discussing story-wise in that section. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more, but I think that's a really good look at habits and figuring out what works for you versus listening to people who say, well, this worked for me, so it's going to work for you, which honestly is not helpful because nobody is the same. Okay, I'm looking at my notes to see if I missed anything. I think that was pretty much what I wanted to share in terms of content and where we are at with that. And honestly, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them or go in a little bit more depth where I can. But obviously, I don't want to give the book away. I don't want to give away my structure or anything like that. But I want you to be excited about the book. I think it's really fun. I think it's going to be great for people who really do want to control your career. Again, I don't know if that's going to be the title, but um, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. And I have a renewed excitement for it from last year purely because I've really locked in on what I'm writing, how I'm writing, and the transition from being a coach to being an author and how my content, my information has to change with that. All right, I want to go into part 2 of this episode, and it might potentially feel like 2 completely different episodes. But that's a little bit of the point here because really I have the content of the book and the people that are going to read that and get something from it. But there's also the process of being an author and what does that mean and how am I working through all of that? And I think it's so interesting to hear the background of what people are doing and what they're going through in real time so that you get some, I don't know, like some insight into what I'm thinking and how that has shifted throughout this entire process. So let's talk about accountability. And if you did listen to my episode, my health episode, where we talked about our health journey and our working out and all of that, this is going to sound a little familiar to you. So here's what happened. I started writing this book in spring of 2025. Yes, 2025, with the intention of finishing it in 2025. That did not happen for a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons was I just had competing priorities. I did not prioritize the book. I said to myself, I'm going to fit my writing in to the free space, quote unquote, free space that I have in my calendar. That was not it. That was not the process. That is not what I should have done. But that's where I was at that point, and that's what I needed it to be. So I was writing, but I was not writing consistently. Um, I just had no real structure or anything that I was working within. I was very much taking a, what are my vibes today and how do I feel about it? And then I would write based on that. Now I have an outline. It's not that I don't have an outline, but I really did not have goals or, anything to really anchor me to the writing. And I also did not have protected time. So, a good friend of mine in December basically said to me, "You have got to figure this out. You need to figure out what you need because you need to write this book." Love him. So happy that he gave me that little push. And I reached out to my friend Cody from Heartworks Writing, and she's my editor, and she's been an editor for me on other projects, my journals, if you're familiar with those that are on Amazon. She's amazing. I've known her for a number of years. We went through a mastermind a couple times together. And so I really trust her, and she knows who I am. She understands me, my style, all of that. And so I contacted her and I said, "Hey, I need some accountability with this. I know what I'm writing. I have a good grasp on that, but I just need accountability so that I can amp up the writing process." And she said, "Yes, let's go." And we have been meeting now since the beginning of 2026. And I will tell you, I have written more in a month and a half than I had written in the 8 months that I was writing in 2025. So, accountability for me is the key. When I really need to push through something, a project, whatever it is, a goal, accountability, external accountability, not internal accountability, is the thing that I need. And I should have realized this based on our health journey. That's what we needed there. We needed the external accountability of our trainer. We got that. Now I needed the external accountability to write this book. And it's not that I wasn't motivated to write the book. I was, but for how I function, for how my brain works, I have to be accountable to somebody else. And being accountable to myself, it doesn't work. It wasn't working for me. So that has been an amazing process. That's why I have been able to get through all of stage 1. And by the time this comes out, I will likely be somewhere into stage 2 because we are just on a roll now. I see it. I get the vision. I have somebody even to talk things out, because again, that works best for me. I need to talk out my process. I need to talk out the structure, and I need somebody to give me feedback from a different lens. And that is what worked and is working so well for me. So, if you're an author and you happened upon this episode, or you want to be an author, or you've wanted to write something and you're trying to figure out what, I truly believe that accountability is a key component to this. And I will say, Cody is not my only accountability. I have another good friend who's also writing a book, and we try to meet about once a week and we do tandem writing. So basically, we're both online at the same time. We set some goals, and we write at the same time. And we are writing completely different books, let me tell you. But it's just the process of having somebody else there, of having a dedicated time. And I will say, as a result of working with Cody, I have protected time in my calendar that is for writing that my entire family is aware of. So that is time that they do not bother me. They don't get in my way, nothing. Like, it is 100% protected time, and I do not schedule over it. So that was one of the big things that I needed to have. Outside of that, I have also found, and this is more of just, I think, the way that I work best, so it's not gonna work for everyone. Again, if you listen to the health episode, some of this is gonna sound familiar. So I don't do well getting up early and writing first thing in the morning. I have a friend who writes a lot of books. He gets up at like 4:30, 5 in the morning, and he writes before he goes to work. I love that for him. That is not me. That is not, I don't function best at that time. And so I found the day and the time that I knew was going to work best for me, where I was going to be the most clear and protected that time. Outside of that, I also found that doing something else while I was writing was very helpful for me. So we have an exercise bike at our house that has a place where I can put my laptop. So I can actually work and ride our bike at the same time. I am going to tell you that has been a game changer for me. And so what I do each week is I look through my week and all the appointments and things that I have scheduled, and I try to set aside at least 3 hours of bike riding. So 3 separate days for an hour, specifically bike riding to write or do something book related. Usually it's writing, but sometimes it's outlining or something like that. So those goals have been really helpful for me. What's important though is it's not the same thing every week. Now my protected time is the same because I had to carve that time out. But the bike and book writing, that shifts throughout the week just depending on what is going on and what other appointments and things I've got going on. So that's what I wanted to share today with you. If you're an author, is you have to figure out what is going to work best for you. What do you need in order to write? What structure is going to work best for you? While I'm saying that accountability worked for me, you might be internally motivated enough to make this work for yourself, and you don't need that external accountability. That's awesome. I love that. I also knew I couldn't be in a group. A lot of people do writing groups. There are tons of writing groups. So many out there for every type of genre, every type of author, local ones, online ones. There's so many options. That was not something that I wanted. I knew that being in a group was not going to be helpful for me. I knew that I just needed one other person that I could talk to and that understood who I was and was going to be able to help me set goals that were helpful. And honestly, she's done so much more than that because I question myself all the time. And she has been so helpful at just level setting me and kind of bringing me back down to earth when I'm getting a little crazy when it comes to writing. So I appreciate Cody so much for her support. And you guys, she's only been with me, let's see, for a month and a half, maybe 2 months by the time this episode comes out. So she's barely been with me, and I already have seen the benefits tenfold. So that's what works for me. You have to figure out what works for you. Okay. The next thing that I want to share, and I talked a little bit about this in the first part of this episode, but I think this is more my strategic brain coming in to this. And so I want to flesh it out a little bit more for people who are trying to figure out whether or not they should write a book and what that book is. So a lot of people write books as a marketing tool for their business. And I think that's great. I think it works for so many people. I have a ton of friends who have done that and it works really well for them. Will my book be a marketing tool for my business? 100%. Yes. My book will also be the book. This book for me is foundational. This is a foundational book to the work that I do, to my business, to everything that I am about as a strategic career consultant. This is the book. So for me, it's more. It's more than a marketing tool. I think that that distinction matters because you have to decide what your book is going to be and how is it going to serve you? Why are you writing it? And what value is it adding to the world, right? Like, what value is it adding to your potential clients? And I think once you understand what that is, the process of writing and the focus and what it needs to be is going to be different. And I rejected writing a book for a very long time. I would say maybe in about my third or fourth year of having my business, and this was about when I came out with the Control Your Career process and the program, I had a lot of people tell me, you need to write a book, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. I did not want to write a book. Even now, I'm so surprised that we are here writing a book. But what happened for me was I found the anchor point for the book because I knew that I did not want to write the same old career book. I did not want it to sound like everybody else. I did not want it to get lumped in with all these other career books that I have read. And let me tell you, I have read a lot of career books. Okay. And I didn't want it to be that. And I knew that if I was going to write this, it had to be different. It had to be unique, and it had to be so core to me, my business, my message. Like, I want it to be sustainable. And so my approach and my reasoning for this is wildly different than a lot of people who write a book purely for marketing purposes. And again, there is no right or wrong here. It's really just preference. And it's really what you are trying to do with your business, with your career as as a business owner, for me as a coach. I think some of this too has to do with my background in higher education. I think I really wanted something that is going to hold up to that audience, because that's a big part of my world and my audience and my connections are faculty members and people in higher education. And so I knew that I wanted something that was going to hold some weight there. And if I couldn't do that, then I didn't want to write it. Well, I think it was 2024, late 2024 was when I realized, I think I got it. I think I know what it is. I think I know what I need to do. And that's what got everything rolling from there. So sometimes it takes time. Again, I rejected writing a book for many years. If you don't want to write a book, don't write a book. You don't have to do it, but you have to understand what it is and why you're doing it so that it adds value not only to the reader, but also to your business and what you're trying to do. All right. Woo, man, I love this. I love talking about this process. I think it's just so fun. And I welcome questions. So if you have some questions, if you have things that you would like to know, then I will incorporate that into the next episode. I'm hoping to do, I'm hoping to probably do another one of these updates probably about midway through my next season. I might incorporate it into another episode that I have. I don't know yet. So just be on the lookout for that. But I want to do a little wrap up because we had part 1, we had part 2, and I really want to do some wrap up to this episode. Just like quick things to consider. So things that are working for me as an author. Getting a writing coach was a game changer. I didn't really talk about this, but having an outline, and I historically am not an outline person, but for this, I absolutely needed it in order to stay on track. So having that outline is just really helpful to keep your writing organized and flowing. And then also understanding what you're writing and how you're writing it. So that goes back to part one, where I was talking about I was trying to solve problems. I was trying to coach in the section when really it was about awareness and helping you figure out your reality, not solving for any issues or barriers that you might have in that specific topic. What are some things that I'm still working on? What are some things that are still challenges for me? I would say balancing writing to an extent with some of my other work. And what I mean by that is some of my days are heavy and they take a lot out of me, and it makes it harder for me to get into a headspace of writing. So I have to be really careful with how I plan my days. Some weeks have been heavier than others where I really don't write a lot because I'm just exhausted and I know the writing is not going to be good. Another thing that I'm working on, and I actually don't think that I mentioned this in the bigger episode, but is over explaining. And I think some of this is the coach in me. But I think that there are sections where I likely am going too in depth with detail, or I'm providing unnecessary information. However, from a writing standpoint, at this point, I am going to over explain everything. And then in the editing process, really work with my editor to make it a little bit more succinct and narrow it down. So I think that is kind of a work in progress because I don't want to limit my voice at all. And then here's some of my advice to other authors or people who want to be authors. Really think about this progress over perfection. I know that's a really overused statement, but it's so true. And I have really had to embrace that as somebody who is a perfectionist, especially with writing. I want it to be good on the first draft. And I've had a number of people say, just create a bad first draft. Just write it bad and we can fix it later. That's very hard for me to do. So I'm really trying to work on making progress. And then if the writing is not coming to me, I stop, because that tells me that I'm not in a good headspace to write about that particular topic or to write at all. And so I'm able to really put some limits on myself and be very self-aware in terms of when I'm going to have good writing and when I'm not. Honestly, I think everybody needs accountability. So I would encourage you, even if you are self-motivated, to still find an accountability person, or a group or a coach or a friend, whatever you need, but figure out what that accountability is going to look like so that you can move through this process much, much quicker, especially much quicker than I am. I could have finished this very quickly and I'm not. I'm hoping to have it done this year. That's the plan, but I needed that push. I needed that accountability, and, you might need that too. So just think about that. One other thing that I want to share that I think is so important for people to know, especially in the age of AI, is that I am not using AI to write, and I'm not using AI to edit. So my writing is my own. It's coming from my brain. I also am very resource oriented. So a lot of resources are going to be going into this as well. I think that's so important in this age because I know a lot of people are using AI to write books, and, to each his own. I think if that's what you want to do, that's totally fine. That is not what I want to do. I want to make sure that this is coming from me. It's my voice. It's me as a coach helping you control your career. That's what I'm really looking for. Having said that, I do use AI to help with outlines, and planning. And the reason for that is because this started off as a coaching program. And I knew when I was flipping it into a book format that I had to think about my process in a different way. And so the way that I currently use AI is really as a thought partner in terms of helping me plan to make sure that I am not missing anything, to make sure that there are no gaps in the content that I am delivering. Because from a coaching perspective, a lot of these things come out with my client. A lot of the topics that we need to talk about, they come out naturally with my client through the coaching process. But writing a book, I don't know you. So I have to be able to cover a lot of different topics and information. And I want to make sure that I'm being as thorough as possible with that. So I wanted to drop that because I know AI is a big topic, especially when it comes to creativity and writing and all of that. And so I wanted to be transparent about how I'm using it, but definitely not using it for writing. And that is something that I'm actually really proud of. And I think is going to be, again, another key component to this book that's going to set it apart. So that's where we're at. The book is happening. We are in it. We are writing. Stage one, writing is basically done. I've got my coach Cody to keep me honest, to keep me going. She's so amazing. And, just figuring out this entire process is a journey in and of its own. And I hope that this was interesting to you. I love sharing this behind the scenes because I know I've had conversations with other people that have written books, and I just love hearing about their process and how they approached it and, what it looked like for them. That's been really interesting. So I just wanted to give some of those updates to you. If you are a potential reader, if this information sounds good to you, please follow along. Um, you know, uh, Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast. You can also get on my email list. That's actually probably the best way to get up-to-date information from me. If you're a writer, connect with me. I love talking to other writers. I'd love to hear more about your journey. But either way, please subscribe. Please, stay connected with me and feel free to share this episode with anyone that you think might find value from it. And remember, you control your career. I'll see you next time.